So today we are going to talk about what is required when setting up a new tank. Maybe you're thinking about getting into the hobby for the first time. Maybe it's been a while, you had a tank in the past, you want to set up one now, or maybe you're just thinking about, upgrading to a new system. What are the things that you need to consider when going into that process? And I'm going to break those down into a couple simple steps. We're going to talk about inspiration, planning, research, and cost. So stick around and find out what goes into all four of those categories. So the first thing we're going to talk about is finding inspiration. And so if you found this video, you've probably already started this step. But essentially what I mean is just going online and looking for pictures or videos that inspire you for what you want to do with your tank, whether that be specific fish that you really like, or corals you want to aim for, even like aquascapes and how you want to design the tank out. There's some really cool things online, and just look around so you have an idea of where you want to go. There's a million directions you can go with this hobby, whether it be saltwater, freshwater, a fowler system with just fish that wouldn't allow for coral, or if you want to do like a nice reef tank with all of your corals, in that sense. Do you want to do an SBS tank? Do you want to do an LPS tank, a mixed reef? What are you looking to do? So if you go online, find things that inspire you, it's going to be a lot easier when you get to the following steps. And this is going to take some time and energy. Don't just go online, type in Google how to set up a reef tank and, watch one video and then go out and buy a bunch of stuff and do that. One of the most common mistakes that people make is that they go online, they find, one video or one article that says, that aligns with what their thought process already is, and then they just run with it. They go, oh, well, I found someone that confirms what I think already, and I just run with it. There's a ton of people saying a ton of different things online. There's plenty of it that is very good advice. There's also plenty of advice that sucks. There are plenty of idiots on the internet, as we all know.
Sometimes I feel like everyone I work with is an idiot. And by sometimes, I mean all times.
I guess what I'm trying to say is it's hard to tell if that one person's bit of advice is based on actual fact and if that's real advice you should follow, or if they just got lucky. How many examples of, videos and things online do you see that say, oh, I never do water changes and my tank looks amazing? And that's fine, but is that because it's what's best for your tank, or is it because they just got lucky and the ones who didn't post a video? The best solution for this is to research thoroughly and find arguments for and against what you're thinking of doing, and then diving into those and seeing which seem the best grounded. When looking for information, look for a reputable source that is willing to tell you the good and the bad. Anybody that says they did everything right and nothing backfired, nothing died, it's all sunshine and butterflies, they're lying.
Liar! Liar!
So look for someone that can say, hey, I screwed up. This is what I did. I tried it out. It didn't work. This is what I would do instead. Or, hey, I've done this. This one worked. These two didn't. People that give you that style of advice, it's a lot easier to believe what they're saying because they're not scared to tell you what they did wrong. Now, when it comes to research, this is going to vary based on what your end goal is. If your end goal is a 20-gallon tank with an anemone and 2 clownfish, your research is going to be pretty simple. What is the nitrogen cycle? How do I cycle a tank? What should my temperature be set at? What should my salinity be? Etc. Those types of questions, very basic. But if you want to go into something more complicated and more in depth, then this becomes quite a bit of a rabbit hole and you could spend a lot of time doing research. I decided I wanted to go with a larger mixed reef tank. So, research what fish are safe to put in that environment. If you walk into your LFS store and you're greeted by this very friendly puffer fish that, he comes up to the glass, and when you move your finger, he, walks along with it, and, they eat out of your hand, and that is great. But your really expensive corals that you put in the tank just became the world's most expensive salad. On top of researching the livestock you're gonna put in the tank, you need to research what the equipment requirements for that livestock you want are. Now, this could be as far as like researching lighting options. Do you need something like, the Ecotech Radions, which are $1,000 a light? And while they're fantastic, can you get away with something else? If your goal is not to do a, acro-dominated SPS tank, you probably don't need the $1,000 Radions. Another thing you're gonna have to research is, filtration options. Look into what options are best for you. If you're gonna stock, 25 fish in a 120-gallon tank with coral, then you're gonna need a lot of filtration. If you're just going for Nemo and an anemone, you don't need a very expensive skimmer and this, that, and the other, and you could probably get away with, a tank that's an all-in-one, and you just have a filter sponge in there, and you'd probably be fine. Another important part of research is researching the types of diseases and pests that you are likely to get with the fish and other livestock that you add to your tank. Now, if your goal is to have tangs, for example, which they're beautiful fish, everyone loves them, you need to think about how you're gonna deal with ick, for example. They're very prone to it, so think about and research what your strategy is gonna be. An important part of that is looking at the pros and cons of both, seeing what is reasonable for you. Not everyone can commit to the eradication method, and if you can't, then you shouldn't try that method, because if something slips through, it's pointless. So in that case, if you can't commit to the eradication method, research what it takes for the management method. Another important part as you are considering setting up a reef tank is to be realistic and cost and budget for what you can do. This is going to be the first time you consider if this is a realistic goal for you. It's really easy to go online and find, Andrew Sandler's Polo Reef and go, wow, I want to do something like that. I am going to put a 17,000-gallon aquarium in the middle of my living room, and it's going to be amazing. All my friends are going to love it, and that's great. But be realistic, it's not going to happen. He manages a hedge fund and has more disposable money than most of us will ever see in our lives. That probably is not a realistic, goal. So look at what you can afford and what you can do and plan according to that. Look at your bank account, talk to your significant other, and see what you can afford. This hobby is expensive. If you only have a few $100s of disposable income, you should really not get into the hobby at this time. Either save up to the point that you can afford it down the road, or, pivot to something else that you can enjoy. And while I hate to turn people away from the hobby, I also don't want to see people get in because, they just think of, oh, I can buy a tank and I can buy a heater, and then all of a sudden they can't succeed because they can't afford the other things they need. The cheapest way to enter the saltwater hobby is through a nano tank. And while they're cost effective, there's a lot of other things that go along with them that make them harder. All of a sudden, you're limited by the amount of space you have. In addition, water parameters are a lot harder to manage in a small tank. So you're gonna spend more time and energy and money actually, measuring your water parameters all the time and checking and dosing and this, that, and the other to keep it stable. Whereas if you had the larger tank, you really don't have to worry about it as much. Another thing that's important when thinking about costs is behind the scenes costs. Now, when I think of a saltwater fish tank, it's really easy to think of, the couple big costs that are involved. And that would be, a tank, obviously, the stand, the lights, the heater, and even the livestock. You can quickly go online and look those up and add those together and go, okay, it's going to cost me X. But what you don't get, and what is missing from a lot of videos and things that I see, is here's this guide, how to set up a tank for $300. And that's great. They go out and they buy a tank for $100. They buy a couple pieces of rock. They buy, 2 fish. And all said and told, it costs $100. But what they don't show in that video is all the stuff that they already had. Now, those people setting it up, they already had an RODI machine because they have other tanks. They already had test kits so they can test their water. They already had a mixing bucket. And I know these things seem, like a mixing bucket seems stupid, but if you have to go out and buy a brute trash can, that's another cost that is not included in that $300. So think about what the costs behind the scenes are before you really commit. My RODI system is a 100 gallon a day system that I bought off bulk Reef supply, and it works great. It cost me about $200. Now, what isn't factored into that price is I had to buy a stand so I could set it up in a, inconspicuous place. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I don't have a garage. I don't have a basement, so I couldn't set it there. So I had to put up a cabinet in my bathroom so that it is tucked away and keeps my spouse happy. I will be making a video soon about how I set up my RODI system and how it's plumbed in such a way that it's inconspicuous and it keeps my wife happy.
Happy wife, happy
Aquarium.
Remember that.
Test kits. There are some cheaper options like the API test kits, and they will get the job done in the beginning. But to be completely honest, I hate the API test kits. I think they're terrible, they're inaccurate, they don't give the accuracy I want, and so I ended up upgrading to the Hannah checkers. I love them, they're easy, they're fast. The problem is they're $65 a pop right now. Really think about these costs when you're getting into this hobby, because it's stuff that nobody tells you right off the bat. The key ingredient for a saltwater reef tank is salt. You're gonna have an RODI, but you need to add salt to that water to make it livable for the fish. Now, I have had this tank up and running for about 5 months. I don't have much in there, so I'm not doing that frequent of water changes, but I've gone through about 2.5 buckets of Red Sea salt right now. At $85 a bucket, and extrapolate for the year, I probably will spend about $500 this year on salt. Another key thing with cost is your filtration. Now, this is how you have a little bit of flexibility. And the common practice in this hobby is a tank and underneath a sump. In that sump, people will add a skimmer, they'll add multiple return pumps, they'll add a refugium, they'll add an algae scrubber, a filter roller, and God knows what else, right? You can pack thousands of dollars or more into your sump if you want. That's not required. The reality is, for a new tank, a simple sump with a filter sock, some biomedia works fine. You don't even need a skimmer in the beginning because you don't have all of the bio load of a fully stocked tank. It's not an acro tank that you have to worry about. You can also go with a canister filter, and your LFS and everyone is gonna scream,
No, God! No, God, please, no!
because that's not the way it's been done in the past. But there are a lot of really good tanks that have been set up with a canister filter. Now, again, if you overstock the tank with 1 million fish, you might need to add a second one. Or if you, have really expensive acro frags and stuff like that you're trying to grow out, then a canister filter might not be the best option for you. You might want the flexibility of what a sump can provide. But if you're just looking for a nice tank and you're not looking to put, $1,000 pieces in there, you can get by with a canister filter that works fine and your tank will be great. it's easier. Like, to clean a canister filter takes 2 seconds. It's super easy. So think about what you need for your build, and that's why this inspiration piece that I talked about earlier comes in, key. What is your end goal? What do you need to get there? And can you add as you go? I have a sump, but I don't have a skimmer in it right now because I don't need it. Why spend $500 on something that can run for 6 months? They only have a fixed life, so why am I going to burn up 6 months of its life when I have nothing in there that needs a skimmer right now? Alright, the last step really is planning. And now that you have your goal in mind, you know what your budget is, you've researched what is required to do what you want, I recommend, make a list. So up at the top of that list, put some pictures if you want, of what your end goal is, and then write down what it's gonna take to get you there. Mark down what your budget is too. If you say, okay, I can set aside $2,000 for this build, or I can set aside $3,000 or $1,000, whatever it is, put that information on the paper so you can, budget off of that as you go through your plan. Next thing is to write out what it's going to take to execute that plan. First thing you're going to need, obviously, a tank. How big? New or used? Personally, I would go with used. You can get a really good deal on a used tank, either from a tank breakdown or from where someone, upgraded on like Facebook Marketplace, and save yourself a lot of money. I got this tank for a couple $100, whereas if I bought a tank this size from the store new, it would have cost me a lot more, twice the amount that I spent. So really look at what it's going to cost to get you, what you need. When it comes to a tank, personally, I recommend going as large as you can.
Did I stutter?
As large as you can. A larger tank is easier to work with, but the other thing is that most people that start small end up upgrading really quick. You can look at any video you want from anyone that said they started small, and within the first 6 months, they're on to a new tank. So, they started with a 40 breeder, and by the end of the year, they're on to a 120 or something like that. So all of the equipment you bought for that smaller tank might not translate to the bigger tank. If you buy a skimmer that is rated for a 40-gallon tank, you're gonna need a bigger one when you upgrade to your 120. Similarly, heaters, you'll need new ones. So pick a size that you're gonna be happy staying with, but this might take being patient. If you're buying a secondhand tank, don't think, okay, I'm gonna go on Facebook Marketplace, I'm gonna get my tank tomorrow. You might have to wait a month until a good deal shows up. Plan out what filtration you are gonna get. As we said earlier, are you gonna go for a sump? Are you gonna go for canister filters? And what do you need when? That is the key, piece. What do you need when? So, do I need a skimmer right away? Probably not. Now, if you're gonna try to set this tank up and fill it from the brim right away, then you probably have enough money that this video is irrelevant to you. If you're gonna do it slowly, then you don't need a skimmer right away because it's not gonna do anything. There's nothing to pull out of the water. Planning out your lighting. Now, if you have, a 200-gallon tank, right? But all you've added is, 3 fish at the moment and a couple of frags, you do not need to blast the whole tank with 400 par. So think about, can I buy pieces over time? Can I, spread the cost out over the course of the next 2 years even as I fill the tank up? Because, okay, so I have my 2 AIs. I don't have coral in there. Why am I going to buy my supplemental lighting if I don't have coral in the system yet? I'm still waiting for the system to settle out. So I'm not going to spend that money on, like the AI blade, for example, if I don't need it yet. Disease management. This is a critical one. Personally, I take this one very seriously. Other people, not so much. But think about what your system's going to be. I like the eradication method. I have committed to what that takes, and that means you know, 2 extra tanks, a separate system. I have a fish going, you know, it's almost been in there a month now. It takes a lot more. If you're not going to go that route, you need to think of something like a diatom filter or, you know, a UV that can, you know, keep parasites at bay. If you want to go the eradication method, I have an interview I did with Humblefish. The man's a genius when it comes to getting rid of fish diseases. So watch that, check it out. There's a lot of useful information. The last method, and I don't even want to say it, but the last method of disease management is called the dump and pray method. If you're thinking about using this method, don't. It's
Very, very stupid.
because the reality is you might get 10 fish in your tank and everything is going great. You might get lucky. But at some point, your tank is either going to lose power, or you're going to add another fish that's a little aggressive, or you're going to add another fish that's accidentally sick, and your entire tank is threatened. So the only thing you could do at that point is pull everything out, which is hard. Your tank's going to have to sit fallow for months, and those fish are going to have to sit in quarantine systems while you medicate and everything. So if you're thinking of dump and pray, just don't do it. Another key piece to plan that a lot of people don't, and they speed through it because they're just so excited they have their new tank and they just, you know, want to get things in there, is your aquascape. Think about how you're going to set it up for maximum utility, both for you, you know, from a coral standpoint, and for your fish. You want it to be an aesthetically pleasing piece, but you want your fish to have the habitat they need to really survive. You want the corals to have the habitat that they need to really survive. How much flow do you need? When you first start out your tank and you just have a couple of frags, you don't need to have 5 MP40s, MP60s, you know, whatever it be, because there's nothing blocking it. You just have your aquascape. You know, so, and especially if you're thinking of going, you know, a softies tank or an LPS tank, you don't need all that flow. If you're deciding to go into a mixed reef or, you know, something with more flow, add it over time as things grow out. When they're small frags, they're not blocking the flow from each other that much. You know, your aquascape is the only thing blocking the flow. So supplement flow as the tank grows out, and you can maintain a steady flow across the tank without just dumping thousands of dollars into, you know, MP40s right off the bat. All right, so we've kind of talked about all the things that are involved when you're planning out a new tank. Hit the like button if you like this video. Subscribe down below so you can see as I have new content coming out, usually every week. This video took me a little longer, but usually I'm posting a video every single week, so you can kind of get an update on what's going on with my tank, what's going on with my fish in quarantine, you know, how to set up a tank, you know, as a new reefer, stuff like that. Thank you very much for watching. This is Brennan's Reef. I'll catch you next time.